Thank you for joining our virtual International Destination Station. Destination Station is a NASA outreach event with the goal of connecting companies and researchers with representatives from NASA and the ISS National Lab to demonstrate how the International Space Station, our incredible microgravity laboratory in orbit, can advance their research and technology development. Typically, Destination Station visits multiple cities throughout the country each year and has become a shining example of collaboration between NASA and the ISS National Lab through joint education of station's capabilities and opportunities. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are living in unique times, but we've also discovered avenues to educate potential researchers in new and novel ways, to include platforms like this virtual International Destination Station. Over the years, NASA and the ISS National Lab have used this forum to engage with a variety of partners that become part of the space station research community, representing highly recognizable companies as well as academic institutions. We hope this event will provide all researchers and viewers an understanding of the incredible research capabilities available when you take gravity out of the equation on the space station. We will share with you examples of experimentation and let you hear the perspectives of astronaut Ricky Arnold on what it is like to execute these experiments in space. Additionally, at the completion of the general event, 2 breakout sessions will be available to attendees. One will focus on answering additional questions about how to access the space station. There you will discuss the criteria that researchers need to consider as they prepare research proposals and other requests to utilize our extraordinary microgravity lab. The second session is focused on education. Both NASA and the ISS National Lab recognize the critical importance of inspiring the next generation of researchers and explorers. So we hope this session encourages students, parents, and teachers alike to discuss current ISS education programs, student research opportunities, and brainstorm avenues of further engagement through the novel space-based environment of the ISS. We look forward to the future of the space station. We see incredible promise and opportunity. For over 20 years, astronauts have been living and working in space continuously, facilitating more than 3,000 different experiments. The knowledge gained from those years of pushing the limits of science and innovation have informed us on target areas that will bring value to our nation and push an emerging market in low Earth orbit. We hope that through events of this nature, we will help spur thoughts on how the space station's microgravity environment can be a part of your research and development in the future. We have an immersive schedule that is sure to make today's event educational and enriching for you. Welcome to the International Destination Station.
Thank you, Jennifer, and welcome to everyone who's here from around the world joining us for International Destination Station. I'm your host for the day. I'm Christine Kretz. I am Vice President of Programs and Partnerships at the International Space Station U.S. National Laboratory. We're here today with our colleagues from NASA to bring you Destination Station. With that, I'd like to welcome you all again from many parts of the world. I know that you're here from everywhere, from Japan to Italy, Australia, Scotland. You're here from parts of the United States, from California to New Jersey, and all around the world. And we're really happy to have you join us today. Thank you and welcome. Today's agenda is going to include an introduction and then a lineup of really great colleagues of mine from both the International Space Station and NASA, joining us to tell you more about research and life aboard the space station. Let me introduce our panelists to you today, starting with, from NASA, Ricky Arnold, who is an astronaut who will join us for specifics about what it's like to work on the space station. Also joining me is David Brady, Associate Program Scientist from NASA, and from the ISS U.S. National Lab, Dr. Ryan Reeves, Program Director, Advanced Materials, and Sean Pfeiffer, who will join us a little bit later for the breakout session. Sean is the Commercial Innovation Manager. And finally, in STEM education, Samantha Thorstensen, who's Education Program Manager for the ISS National Lab. They're all here with me today and excited to hear your comments and your input. Please feel free to use the chat box. And when you do, make sure you tell us where you're from, give us your questions, and we'll do our best to field them, some during and mostly during the Q&A session for this program. Starting us off first is David Brady. So with that, let me give the controls over to David, who's going to tell us a little bit about why exploration. David, take it away.
Thank you, Christine. Let's go ahead and roll the video, please.
The International Space Station is a state-of-the-art microgravity laboratory that is unlocking discoveries not possible on Earth and helping us push farther into deep space.
Every single day, we are answering big questions about Earth and about space, about where we came from and about where we're going. But the other thing that we're doing is we're learning more questions to ask.
Microgravity turns almost everything we know upside down. Liquids behave completely differently. Fire burns in new ways. Biological systems reveal surprises.
There's a few things that have made me gasp out loud up on board the space station. Watching heart cells actually beat has been a pretty big one.
We're studying ways to grow food in microgravity.
I got to tell you, these are pretty amazing.
We're learning how human bodies react to life in space and how to keep crew members safe and strong on long-duration exploration missions.
Deadlifts are awesome on Earth. They're also awesome in zero gravity.
We're testing technologies that will be critical to our return to the Moon and Great Leap to Mars. Our research has contributed to medical and social benefits on our home planet, allowing us to find new ways to combat disease back on Earth and develop technologies to deliver clean water to remote communities in need. The spectacular vantage point of more than 200 miles above our planet supports our monitoring of Earth's climate, natural disasters, and plant life.
I can't begin to describe some of the sights that you get to see. It's just an incredible view of our planet that we have from here.
The growing new space economy, so vital to our continued progress in space, is flourishing in low Earth orbit. We're inspiring future generations from a platform that is one of the largest international collaborations of our time. We're doing science at 17,500 miles per hour. Come along for the ride.
Okay, so why explore? All right, I've had a lot of colleagues talk about this, and we universally agree that it's human nature to explore, but that doesn't really ask the question why we have that in our human nature. I was raised in a small rural town in Northeast Texas, and although my school system didn't always have all of the classes that were useful for me when I eventually started training to be an engineer in college, one of the things it did have is it had a lot of wide open spaces. And one of the things I enjoyed doing as a child was to wander the woods back in the back of the property behind our house and just kind of look around and see what was there. And when I did that, I'd always see things there that I couldn't explain. And immediately my brain would start to try and understand, why was this set of sticks set up a certain way, you know, or why was the stream running through this particular area? And I think you've all done this sort of thing. It's like sitting in the park and watching ants move towards an anthill and carry the food into the anthill and build the anthill up and things like that, or watching a bird ply the air currents and ply the thermals in order to stay aloft. The thing is that, why do we explore? It's to survive and to thrive. We weren't given fangs and claws like a lot of animals are. We were given this intellect, this brain that allows us to observe, understand, and then try and do something with that, to develop technology to help manage our environment or protect ourselves. And at this point in time in humanity's history, it's not just about survival, thank goodness, it is about thriving. But space exploration is about learning new things for both. I mean, because eventually we're going to have to leave this little rock. We know about stellar evolution, and we know that it's a long time till the sun comes to get us, but it's going to happen. So exploration is really about surviving and thriving, and everybody is an explorer, no matter what you're doing. It's the use of your brain. Now, when I talk about that, that's talking on a more aesthetic standpoint, more psychological standpoint. But let's talk a little bit about the tangibles too. And this applies to space exploration, about why we explore. So as we mentioned before, when you explore, it makes you imagine things. It makes you use your imagination and try and think about why things are the way they are, which requires innovation. It requires a different way of looking at things, a different way of doing things sometimes. And that results in discovery. In turn, innovation creates new technology, new ways of managing our environment, or interacting with our environment or with each other. And the discovery results in new knowledge, which we can in turn apply and create new economic opportunities. Now, this isn't all about just making money. It's about making new things, new products, new services, things that make our lives better, that makes it easier to survive and thrive. And those economic opportunities support further exploration, which eventually leads us around full circle back to additional innovation and discovery. Now, when we apply the exploration spirit to the space program, and specifically to ISS research, one of the questions that we come up with is, why do we do research on the ISS? Well, I think that a lot of y'all are familiar with the old real estate adage about, when you look at a property, what three things determine the value of that property? And of course, most of you know it's location, location, location. Well, the interesting thing about the ISS is that there are three elements that we like to talk about that determine the value of doing research on the ISS, that tell us, why do we do research on the ISS? And the first one of those is sustained microgravity, because there's many ways you can get microgravity, even in terrestrial situations like drop towers or parabolic flights in aircraft, or you can even fly on a sounding rocket and get a short period of suborbital flight and get a short period of microgravity. But if you're really trying to understand something, if you're really trying to keep something in a certain state for a certain amount of time and understand how gravity plays in to the equation there, you need sustained microgravity, and the space station is the only place you can currently get that. The space station also serves as an excellent vantage point, and I like to talk about our Earth science and our space science experiments, investigations, and looking down and looking up. Because in both cases, it's very important to have a platform in order to do this. And it's not just about the location in terms of seeing the Earth or seeing the celestial sphere. It's also about having the infrastructure there to support your instrument. I mean, most instruments that fly into space, all instruments that fly into space have to have an infrastructure. They have to have a satellite bus, and they have to have a data comm system, and they have to have thermal control and power and video and all sorts of other things that are needed. The space station provides all that. That's one of the best things about it. It's not just the vantage point from a standpoint of what you can see from there. It's the vantage point and the infrastructure that supports what you're going to do there with your experiment. And finally, the extreme environment of low Earth orbit gives you some things that you cannot get in a terrestrial laboratory. Many of these things are very useful for things like material science, exposure platforms outside the space station. And so if you're looking for things like hard vacuum, thermal variations, radiation, atomic oxygen, and high-speed impacts from things like micrometeoroids, the space station is a very valuable, a very useful platform. If you want to learn more about why we do research in the ISS, there's a very good, about 6 to 7 minute video. It's an episode in a series called NASA Explorers, and Microgravity is the title of season 4. And you can find the Microgravity series on facebook.com/NASA Explorer series. Check out season 4, episode 1, and it will do a much better job than a speaker with a bunch of flat slides can provide you. It's got some great video and narration to talk about why we do microgravity research on the space station. So what types of research are on the ISS? You may be wondering, hey, can you support my particular area of interest and all that? Well, we do all sorts of type of research at ISS. Most of these categories are based upon recommendations in the decadal survey from the National Research Council. But if you are interested in doing research on the ISS, we have a number of categories that we explore. Biotechnology is one of these. Human research is very important for understanding things that help benefit us on Earth, as well as exploring, going out into the universe and exploring the effects of space, microgravity, radiation, and things like that on human beings. Earth and space science, I already talked a little bit about that when we were talking about the platform. Physical science is very important in microgravity. You have things like fluid physics, you have things like Bose-Einstein condensates that you can study. Technology development is a big part of our portfolio, especially as we prepare for Artemis missions, we prepare to go out beyond low Earth orbit, and also with regards to the development of low Earth orbit as an economic marketplace where we will have NASA just one of many customers. And finally, our educational activities, although they're not part of the NRC recommendations, they're a very important part, a very important aspect of our mission. We need to inspire and educate and reach out and make sure we have prepared the next generation for carrying the torch forward. So the platform, your orbiting laboratory, and we refer to this time all the time as an orbiting laboratory rather than a spacecraft because it's both. But like a lot of terrestrial laboratories, it has a lot of equipment, and my colleague is going to go into that later in this presentation to describe some of the details on that. But let's just start with the physical size of this thing. Let's just take a quick look at it. The spacecraft itself, the truss element is about the same length as an American football field. For those of you who follow soccer instead, it's about the same length as a soccer pitch as well. Some other details about the platform that you might not be familiar with is the spacecraft mass. Now, when you look at this, you look at, wow, that's a big number. Just to give you something to relate it to, it's about the same mass as the max takeoff weight as the largest airliner available, the A380. Some of these other specifications on here, pressurized volume, it's about the same size on the interior as a 5-bedroom house. And in terms of the orbital altitude, the orbital parameters, it flies over about 90% of the populated area of the Earth, which gives the vantage point, a good vantage point from a standpoint of studying things like migration for birds and for other animals. Some of the things that we've done during the pandemic is the change in the lighting in cities to see how patterns of human beings, how we're moving around and how we're using our facilities or we're not during the pandemic. So there's a lot of advantage to the particular parameters for this vehicle versus some of the other Earth observing platforms. And of course, any presentation to talk about research would be incomplete if we didn't talk about the folks who actually put their hands on the research. This is your on-orbit research team, our astronauts. They're the best and the brightest. They come from various fields, but they're all very accomplished individuals. On the right, you can see a couple of the vehicles that we use to take them to and from the space station. But the point of this slide is to really emphasize the human in the loop allows the part we were talking about before, the human brain to be involved in research and to notice things that might not be able to be noticed in an automated processing system or via telescience quite as well. And so this is your on-orbit research team. These folks are your hands and eyes of performing your research and making your project successful. A little bit of history and statistics. We recently celebrated 20 years of continuous human presence in space. That means that in the first 2 decades of the space station, we spent about a decade assembling it. about the last decade. I like to characterize the second decade as a decade where we really started learning how to use the platform. We discovered new things, like, for example, small sat deploys is something that we really didn't think about in the beginning, but because of one of our commercial collaboration partners and because of one of our international partners, that has become a huge contribution to the small sat revolution, if you will, on orbit, in low Earth orbit. So those first 20 years have resulted in some substantial research and technology development. I think the next 10 years, this third decade, is going to have us fully work the platform to its full potential. So just to summarize what we've done so far with the space station, more than 4,000 researchers from more than 100 countries have conducted more than 3,000 experiments, and this has resulted in more than 2,000 research publications. Some serious research and technology development. We'd love to have you as part of this team, as part of this effort. We think that space can empower your project in a way that no other element can. We hope you'll want to be part of this. And at this time, I'd like to hand over to my colleague from the ISS US National Lab, Dr. Ryan Reeves.
Thank you very much, David. First, I'd like to introduce the ISS US National Laboratory. In 2005, United States Congress designated the US portion of the space station as a national laboratory. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, that means that now this very unique research facility is open to users like yourselves to solve big problems. The organization that I work for, the Center for Advancement of Science and Space, or CASIS, manages the ISS National Lab. So we're here spreading the word for users like yourselves to let you know that the space station is open as a national resource to be used. Whether you're an engineer, a scientist, you work for a corporation, an academic institution, a governmental agency, or you're a high schooler, we have opportunities available for you to explore the new science, make new discoveries, and create new products in space. So why do we do all of this? Well, the ultimate goal of the ISS National Lab is to bring value back to the United States economy and the US taxpayer by benefiting life here on Earth. The National Lab fosters a diverse range of research in life sciences and physical sciences, remote sensing and technology development, as well as education to achieve that goal. So let's kind of talk about some of that portfolio. To help streamline and focus some of the research and development efforts, the National Lab supports 5 different lines of business. The first line of business that's probably easiest to understand is fundamental science. So in this, we're looking to explore the basic physics of the life around us by removing gravity, which oftentimes can be a dominant force, to look at some of the underlying physics. If we build upon that to then go one technology step beyond, we get to technology development and demonstration. So in this line of business, what we're looking to do is to advance technology or demonstrate it in a relevant environment, say the space environment. So this is largely about products and furthering that developmental progression for commercial entities. One of the lines of business that I'm particularly excited about is our in-space production line of business. So in this case now, what we're looking to do is to manufacture new products in space. So that could be materials, that could be improved production, and have improved properties compared to here on Earth if they were produced in a microgravity environment. Or perhaps that means that there are materials that can only be produced in a microgravity environment. So that's a very exciting opportunity. We also have allocation for resources by the commercial service providers for the purposes of promoting and enabling their respective commercial efforts, thereby contributing to the growth and development of the low Earth orbit economy. Of particular interest for many of you will be our STEM engagement and educational outreach. So there are programs and projects, public-private partnerships that leverage the ISS to advance U.S. leadership in space activities, as well as industry-related workforce development by engaging K through 12 students and enhancing higher education. So the ISS is a world-class multidisciplinary laboratory. There are glove boxes and furnaces, centrifuges. We have 3D printers for polymers and soon to be metals, as well as biological tissues. There are dedicated facilities for conducting combustions and fluids research, material science, and quantum physics. As an example, the coldest place in the universe right now is inside the ISS in a hardware called the Cold Atom Lab, which is used to explore quantum behavior. On the life sciences side, there are freezers and refrigerators, incubators, microscopes, plant greenhouses, and DNA sequencers. So in this image here, the crew is working on the rodent research habitat. Outside the ISS, there are also facilities for studying Earth and the cosmos, like looking out for dark and trying to discover dark matter. There are facilities for materials testing in some of the most extreme environmental conditions known to man. And then there are also facilities out there for deploying CubeSats from the ISS. So next, I'll touch on a couple specific examples from our ISS National Lab portfolio. The first one here is from Adidas. And so what Adidas was looking to do was to improve the performance of their soles, the shoe sole. And so those soles are made of foams, and those foams have varying sizes in them. So if you were to think about and take marbles and put them all in a glass jar, right? And then you kind of shake that, give it some agitation, you would notice that they kind of separate out, right? Like pebbles, the same thing. Well, the same thing is true of these foams. On Earth, there's gonna be a natural tendency to segregate out based on their size. And that might limit some of the performance that you get from these. So what Adidas did is they sent out an experiment where they looked at some of the settling that you get from these foams when you remove gravity and the absence of that settling. What does the performance look like, and what is the structure there? And then from that, they can take that and try to improve manufacturing here on Earth to emulate the conditions, that structure that they were able to get when gravity was removed. So Adidas has several projects that they've flown with us. The next example here is one of a number of organizations and institutions that is leveraging microgravity to address human health issues on Earth, like osteoporosis, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases. In this case, the Michael J. Fox Foundation was looking to develop a drug to inhibit a protein associated with the development of Parkinson's disease. There are a couple 100,000 different proteins in the human body, and if you know their structure, then you can design a drug to mimic, enhance, or inhibit that protein function. The difficulty is knowing some of those protein crystals won't crystallize well in a lab in a gravity environment. And so what has been shown to be done is to send those into a microgravity environment where the growth is a lot of times slower and produces more perfect crystals. So it's it's easier to study that protein atomic structure. Some of you are likely very familiar with 3D printing. So there is a biofabrication facility that prints tissues or tissue-like materials on board the ISS. So this explores the possibility of potentially printing human tissues and maybe even someday organs in microgravity. while bioprinters here on Earth are limited to potentially about 1 centimeter in thickness, because what happens is the weight of that tissue collapses down on itself and collapses things like blood vessels that are necessary to feed and supply that tissue. In a microgravity environment, you can print that tissue without the need for support structures like scaffolds. And so now what you can do is you can print that and allow it to mature and grow and give those blood vessels time to grow and mature before they are returned to Earth. Finally, the last example that I have is one of those in-space production examples that I was talking about before. There are currently 3 companies that are seeking to commercialize the production of non-traditional optical fibers in microgravity. So most optical fibers that you're familiar with are silica-based. In this case, these are Z-bland fibers. So each one of those letters stands for a different atomic element, like the ones behind me here. The problem becomes that each one of those elements has a very different atomic mass. And so given time when drawing these fibers, they separate out. And that can lead to decreased performance. It can lead to losses, optical losses along the length of that. And therefore, these Z-bland fibers can't live up to the potential that that theoretically has been shown over, say, silica fibers. What's been shown, though, is if you do this in a microgravity environment, you don't get crystallization and you don't get a lot of those defects, so that you can get much better properties out of these materials. So this is just one of the examples of materials and products that can be produced in space of a quality that can't be replicated here on Earth. So with all of that, you don't need to be an expert in space research. You don't have to be a space engineer. We are here to help you, and we have partners. We call them implementation partners. And they are very well skilled in translating your ground-based research into things that can be done on station. So we're here to help you in identifying and helping you to make those new discoveries and offering the ISS as a platform for you to do your very unique research. So with that, I'd like to turn over the presentation now to my colleague, Samantha Thorstensen, our Education Program Manager, who will be discussing our STEM engagement and educational outreach.
Hi, thank you, Ryan. So we have a lot of really exciting things that we're doing in education and outreach on the National Lab. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Space Station Explorers. That's what we're calling the education program here at the National Lab. Space Station Explorers is a community of educators, learners, and organizations that make STEM learning fun and exciting through connections with the ISS National Lab. We collaborate with partner organizations on innovative programs and resources for K-12 students, educators, and now we're working on more programs in higher education. So these are just a few of the wonderful examples that we have. The ISS has enabled a revolution in educational access to space. The same assets that make the ISS a powerful laboratory for scientists also makes it an invaluable platform for student researchers, research investigations, and educational outreach. So for the past 20 years, students have been designing, building, launching, and operating experiments on the ISS. We're going to be talking a lot more about these opportunities as well as NASA STEM on Station at the STEM breakout. So I hope you're all able to join us then. And with that, I'm going to pass it on over back to Christine. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Samantha, Ryan, David. What a great job. And it's always great to hear about the kinds of things that are going on from improved material science in space to medical technology that's being worked on. And of course, really exciting STEM programs like Slime in Space. So if you hadn't caught that on Nickelodeon, it was really great to have a scientist talk about the difference between liquids in space and on Earth. And so that's something that you can also look up. With that, I'm excited to have Ricky join us, and I know it's the moment you've been waiting for because it's not every day you get to hear from an astronaut. So let me tell you a little bit about Ricky. He is a native of Maryland and worked in marine sciences and as a teacher. So for all of you STEM enthusiasts, Ricky was a teacher in places like Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia before beginning his NASA career. He was selected as an astronaut in May of 2004, and he spent 209 days in space on 2 missions. In 2009, he flew on the Space Shuttle Discovery, so a shuttle mission. Then it was he followed that with a later mission in Expeditions 55 and 56 on the International Space Station. So on the Discovery platform, when he was there, he delivered a pair of power-generating solar array wings that helped to install 2 spacewalks totaling. He was in spacewalking for a total of 12 hours and 34 minutes. And I think I'd like to walk in space, but that seems like a lot of time outside of your craft. So you'll have to tell us a little bit about that, Ricky. And he's done lots of investigations to benefit life on Earth and more about things that help us to do space exploration in the long run. I know there's a lot of questions that are coming up here about Ricky. We can't wait. I know there's a lot of questions coming up about how astronauts work out in space and keep their bodies strong. And I'm sure Ricky can tell us all about that. So if you do have more questions, we'll try to answer them in chat and we will get to questions next. So I've got Post-it notes all over the place with your questions. So with that, Ricky, join us and tell us about life in space.
Thank you, Christine, for the warm introduction. It's wonderful to be here with you today and to share this wonderful facility in low Earth orbit that everyone in the world pretty much has access to. I've had the opportunity to live and work in some amazing places, but none more amazing than the International Space Station. And what I would like to do is through video share some highlights of my 2 missions to the ISS. So if we can start the video, please. The first time I went to the space station was in 2009 on the Space Shuttle Discovery. We had 3 major mission objectives. There I am on launch day, all smiles. And you can see mission objective number 1 walking down at the tail end of us here. And that's Koichi Wakata. He's waving to you right now. Koichi was going to be the first long duration crew member from Japan to serve on the International Space Station. So it was a big moment for Japan and a big moment for the world. And it was a big moment for me sitting on top of the space shuttle at sea level in Florida, and the main engines ignite, the solid rocket motors ignite, and you are on your way. And in 8.5 minutes, you're going to go from sitting still to traveling around the planet at 17,000 miles an hour, 27,000 kilometers per hour at a height of 250 miles or about 400 kilometers. As we watch the solid rocket motors separate, you feel all of this while you're flying. Tucked neatly in our payload bay was a massive payload, the S6 truss. And that was also something we were going to deliver to the International Space Station as one of our primary mission objectives. So we arrived to low Earth orbit. The view is phenomenal. I highly recommend it to everyone. And over the course of 2 days, we started chasing the ISS. And what started off as a point of light, just a star in the distance, soon grew to be the most massive and impressive engineering feat I think humans have ever undertaken. That was a view looking out of the tail of the space shuttle and as we docked to the ISS. Now, waiting for us on the space station at this time were 3 ISS crew members. And the reason there were only 3 ISS crew members was because we didn't have enough electricity for more. And you saw we delivered Koichi Wakata, so mission objective 1 is complete. Mission objective 2 was to install that S6 truss, and we needed to do that through a complex choreography of robotic arm operations and spacewalking. But first I had to kind of get my head around the view of this Earth through the visor of the world's smallest spaceship. It's just nothing like seeing Earth through the visor of a helmet. To give you an idea of scale, there's the two of us sitting out on the S6 truss that we delivered in the back of the payload bay. A radiator is going to deploy. And then finally, the last two sets of solar array wings were deployed while we watched from inside the space station. So with the ability to generate more electricity, we could now have more than 3 crew members. In fact, now we have up to 7. And when you have more crew members, you have more time to take care of science. So mission objective 2 was complete. We got the power generating. Mission objective 3 was to leave Koichi on the one side of the hatch and bring Sandy along with us on our side of the hatch, and to return her to Earth following our 8-day stay on the ISS. I am pushing a button here that literally says undock. I'm not making that up. It's an automated sequence to undock, but I love this image because you can actually see Sandy's reflection in the window as we back away from the place we called home. I didn't really know what was going through her head at that moment because I only been there a few days and it was a very rushed time, but she lived up there for months and knew she probably wasn't going to maybe get back. She fortunately did get back for a few days. Well, here's what the space station looked like when we left, with a full array of solar generating panels. Our mission was done. 3 primary mission objectives complete, and we returned home safely, landed on a massive runway in Florida. It felt to me a lot like a commercial airliner, except we were unpowered. The space shuttle was a glider, and we glided gently to the runway 12.5 days after we left in the same place, or actually not too far, a short walk from the landing pad to the launch pad. A short drive, it'd be a longer walk. Little did I know at this moment in time that the next time I returned to Earth would be even more dramatic than landing in a glider. Because 2017, I had the opportunity, I was assigned to a crew to go back to the International Space Station to live and work as part of expeditions 55 and 56. The 3 of us in the back row, we're going to fly to space, join the 3 gentlemen in the front row, work together for a couple of months. They'd go home, and then the folks on the right would fly up, join us, and we'd work together again for about another 4 or 5 months. But this time I was launching on another iconic spaceship, the Soyuz. And here's the crew of 3, myself on the left, Oleg Artemiev, our Soyuz commander, and Drew Feustel, as we go to the launch pad, climb up onto our rocket from the very launch pad that Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space, launched from many years ago. And it was every bit as exciting as a shuttle launch. I've heard people compare, my colleagues compare the space shuttle to this big lumbering truck, and the Soyuz more like a sports car. And I think that's true, including the place where you get to sit is a lot smaller in a sports car, and the Soyuz carries 3 people. Not a lot of payload materials can go up. Pretty cramped, but it is a wild ride. And I had my own window right next to my head, and I have these images of both launching and landing that I'll never forget because I could watch all of it take place outside the window. Well, approaching the ISS, we took 2 days, took some time catching up to it as we gently tumbled through space. It didn't look that much different to me than it had the first time, but the mission was definitely going to be different because I launched in March and I wasn't coming home until October. So as we approached and got ready to dock, I was thinking a lot about what this was going to be like to be away from my planet, my family, my friends for a really long period of time, and to work in a really unique, exciting, dynamic environment like the space station. You're looking at the docking target here. I promised there were going to be 3 people waiting for us. NASA promised me the same thing, and it was true. Anton was the commander. I didn't really know Anton all that well, but you would never suspect by the greeting that we received when we came through the doorway. And this is kind of how we have to operate in space. We're an international team. We come to be a family. We celebrate birthdays. We celebrate baby's first steps. We mourn together, we grieve together, we work as a family because we're up there for a long period of time. Well, since I had left the Baikonur Cosmodrome in 2 days, my family hadn't seen me since they saw the rocket launch. So this was actually the first video we sent down to the ground to let folks know how we were feeling. But one thing that was on our mind is we had a spacewalk to do almost right away. And we've actually spent time in our Soyuz capsule studying for this spacewalk.
And then we'll kind of hit the ground running because we have an EVA coming up very shortly. So Drew and I actually took some time to study on the way here while we were.
And that was true. We were studying.
We'll be doing some more of that, and these guys will be getting us squared away for that.
We did 3 spacewalks on this mission. Most of the work we did was gearing up for the arrival of commercial crew. We upgraded a lot of the cameras for approach and docking. It had been several years since I'd done a spacewalk. You'd think you wouldn't forget just how challenging and exciting and awe-inspiring it is, but this was as much fun as the first one I had done. And you look at the view, that's me there with the Earth at my back. It really takes your breath away. Here I am, I'm hanging upside down while attached to the robotic arm while one of my friends flew me around inside and my head's pointing toward Earth. It was a very strange sensation to be flying around in space, seemingly on your own, but you had a whole team of people taking care of you. It's a really good view on the right of the Japanese lab with the external palette where a lot of science is done outside of the space station. Again, some more views of the hardware and Drew and I working outside of the space station as the Earth passes beneath us. One of the real challenges on a spacewalk is, well, they're long days. You're in a pretty uncomfortable pressure suit and you're in an environment where everything is floating and moving and it's just really hard to maintain stability. It gets dark outside. As you see us moving around here, you can imagine at night, we can get disoriented pretty quickly in the dark. In fact, the outside of the ISS has arrows pointing to get you to the airlock and location indicators so you know where you are. Well, after about 10 and a half hours in the suit with only water to drink, you're tired, you're hungry, and you're feeling good. You need your friends to help you get out of the suit and have a meal prepared for you to recover from a really exciting day. Well, after 2 months, the first Soyuz that we joined, those 3 guys went home and another Soyuz launched. And Sergei Prokopiev, Russian pilot, and Alexander Gerst, a German ESA geoscientist, and Serena Onion-Chancellor, an American, we got to look at Alex's toy first, but Serena Onion-Chancellor, an American flight surgeon, joined us, and they were going to stay with us for the remaining 4 months of our time together on orbit. All of our materials and supplies, including your science experiments, will largely arrive by cargo vessels. On the right, you have SpaceX Dragon. On the upper left-hand corner, you have Northrop Grumman Cygnus. In the lower corner, you had the HTV from Japan. We also have Russian Progress. These are largely autonomous vehicles. At this point in time, though, you can see this SpaceX flying down the Nile and the Red Sea as it approaches autonomously. And it gets close to the ISS, but the last little bit is a human flying a robotic arm going out and grabbing a spaceship that's going around the Earth at every 90 minutes. Today was my turn to go out and grab a spaceship. And that was me flying the arm, going to grapple the Dragon. People ask, what's it like being in space? Are you nervous? Like, no, not really. But at that moment in time, for those 90 seconds was the most stressful time because there were thousands of kilograms of science experiments worth millions of dollars. And I was the person flying the arm to go get it. And there we were unpacking. In our free time, we gather in the cupola, both for science and for our own fun, to take a look back at this beautiful Earth that we all share. The aurora, you can actually see a satellite fly over the right solar array ring here. There it goes, of the SpaceX Dragon. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see the island of Tahiti and then the large coral atolls of French Polynesia, which of course are very, very high risk from sea level rise associated with climate change. Traveling across Italy and past Greece, in the Mediterranean, bathed in moonlight. And then that ribbon of light in the darkness is the Nile River Valley across the Red Sea, and then thunderstorms over Yemen and in the Horn of Africa. The little green lights are actually fishing boats in the Gulf of Thailand. 16 sunrises and sunsets a day are visible from the space station. Here we are flying over California, where you can see smoke from fires in the Central Valley. On the right is the Sea of Cortez. So we head over Mexico, back over the Pacific. You can kind of see the Yucatan Peninsula off to your left there. Somewhere underneath these clouds are the Galapagos Islands of Charles Darwin and the Beagle fame. And then we head back over the Andes into South America. And you can actually see the large salt flats of Bolivia passing right in the middle now, and then cross through Argentina. And then the Earth, this brilliant blue, turns into a deep indigo and then fades to black as you head into orbital night. It's pretty awe-inspiring. Massive thunderstorms. This was actually over Oklahoma and the panhandle of Texas, which generated tornadoes. The city of Houston, right there on the coast, New Orleans, and a thunderstorm over the Mississippi Delta and Florida off to the side. And just heading into sunrise, where it's very subtle, the color changes. You'll actually see, this is over Asia, you can see thunderstorms and lightning. Someone's going to have a wet morning. In the sunrise, the station gently starts to illuminate, and then it goes kind of again just in reverse of what you saw during sunset. And the Canada arm kind of pointed down toward Earth at about the 2 o'clock position in that view. We were there to do science. David did a wonderful job summarizing some of the stuff we do, but that's our bread and butter work on the space station. It's really exciting to be a part of, and to know that you're up there doing the work of these talented researchers all around the world. I think David said 100 countries and thousands of researchers, and you're the person up there helping them implement their science program and culminate. Some people, it's their life's work, and it's just a wonderful team to be a part of and to work in this amazing facility. This is one STEM opportunity too. ARIS, using ham radio to talk to school students. I was actually talking to school students. That's the risk of zero gravity. Oleg had to grab, he was floating, so he grabbed onto my camera, and I said, Oleg, I just warned you about this. We spent about 2.5 days on the space station exercising. We have a cyclogrometer, a bicycle that we ride. We have a treadmill, which you have to wear. We have 2 treadmills. We have to wear a harness that holds you down to the surface, and the advanced resistive exercise device. This is some of the mitigation we have learned about what the toll being in microgravity can take on the human body. And the reason is, this is how you get around. I didn't stand for 197 days. I didn't walk for 197 days except on the treadmill. And even playing something like a modified game of tennis, you're really not working your major muscles all that hard. So exercise is critical. So is fun. This is the old, how many people can you cram into a crew quarters? This is the world's worst barbershop, probably the solar system's worst barbershop, but you had to be able to do a lot of different things because you're up there together and relying on each other. And one of the real thrills, though, is after a long week, just gathering together as an international family and sharing a meal and kind of discussing what's happened during the week. Good night from the ISS. That's a view inside my little private quarters, which was about the size of a refrigerator. Well, after about 7 months, it was time for us to say goodbye to our 3 friends. We climbed into our spaceship. A few weeks later, another spaceship was going to fly up to replace us. We got into our spacesuits, closed the hatch behind us. We separated from the ISS. We slowed our orbital speed down right over the southern tip of South America. I'll never forget the view I had of Patagonia looking out my window as we did our deorbit burn. And somewhere over the Red Sea, we head into Saudi Arabia and we enter a plasma field. And this is a view out of the window as we take all that energy of motion and turn it into friction so we can slow down and land safely. It is a wild ride. I mean, you're bouncing, you're moving around, there's alarms going off, you're trying to keep track of your altitude. You're feeling gravity for the first time in 197 days. The parachute deploys, it looks really peaceful, but you're swinging on the end of a rope. and you're bouncing up and down, and then you know you're getting close when the seats strike to prepare for landing. So an impossibly small place gets even smaller, and then you very, very gently, I'm kind of joking here, you back into Earth out in the steppes of Kazakhstan, starting not too far from where our journey began. The hatch opens, that first breath of fresh air since March, some new faces with big smiles there to greet you and help you make your way out. The science continues almost as soon as you land. As part of that, how does this impact humans, and what does it mean for long duration space flight as we head out into the solar system? So you're out in the middle of the steppes of Kazakhstan. You're surrounded by a lot of people you don't know, maybe a place you'll never get back to again. And I was a long way from Houston, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking, I'm back on Earth. I'm home. And this was something I think that summarizes the space station. You know, and Earth, we're all connected. We don't, everything we do has an impact on one another, both in space and here on Earth. And I think it's critical that we take those lessons we've learned about cooperation and higher purpose and apply those to some of the very real challenges we have here on planet Earth. And we're trying to address some of those challenges by the work we do on ISS. So please join us.
Ricky, that was awesome. Everybody's telling you it's awesome and they all want to see that video again. And that is just super cool. And I'm going to have the panel join us here. Folks asking questions. I have some queued up here that you've been asking. I got Post-it notes all over my desk. If you do want to ask some more questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. I'll get to as many as I can. And we've been trying to answer them in chat where we can, because we're delighted with all these questions. We're really excited. This is fun, and we're glad to have you with us today. So I have all my panelists here, and I'm going to start doling out some questions. Ricky, you're up first because that was awesome, and everybody wants to know what it's like to be an astronaut. So I'm going to ask you two questions that have come up a couple of times. One is just, you know, what do you eat up there? I told them that you can have cookies, but what kind of food do they give you, and what's your favorite? Like, what is the food like in space?
Well, so most of our food is kind of like a backpacking trip. It's either thermostabilized food that comes in a pack that you just warm it up. And another type is dehydrated food. Launching water to space is expensive. So if we take the water out and add it later, so kind of prepared meals, you warm it up in an oven, or you add hot water and warm it up in an oven. My favorite food is when the people who we're packing up our vehicles full of science and materials and supplies also found room for fresh fruits and vegetables. So whenever we got something that had some crunch to it was always really exciting. And so the work we're doing to grow vegetables and fruit in space is absolutely critical for I think the long-term health and well-being of crews as we head out into the solar system.
That's awesome. You showed your tiny little personal area, your little bit of space in space. And people want to know, what's it like to sleep? Is it like sleeping on Earth, or is it hard to do? Tell us about sleeping.
It takes getting used to, because you're really not laying down and you don't really have the need for a pillow because your head's not resting on anything. In fact, I made a pillow, and if I stood up in my crew quarters, my head was pretty much touching my feet would be on the bottom, my head would be touching the top. So I would kind of put the pillow on top of my head just so I wouldn't hit my head in the middle of the night. And you're in a sleeping bag, and I would gently strap myself down to a wall in my crew quarters. But you sleep really well. You know, there's no hot spots like there is with a mattress. It just takes a little getting used to. But once you do, you find you sleep really well.
Well, it must take some getting used to. And, you know, I think it sounds kind of snug, at least, and kind of cozy. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, there's that. Hey, I'm going to move over and ask David a question. Somebody asked early on in this, how many experiments, and I think they meant how many experiments are on there at a time, because we keep Ricky and the astronauts really busy. But could you give me both? How many experiments are on there at a time, and kind of how many experiments have we done in space in 20 years, David?
Yeah, it's been, we usually talk about it in terms of an expedition, and expeditions vary in length. I mean, the most recent ones have been about 6 months long, but as Ricky was saying, we typically have a crew member on board for about 6 months or so, and it used to be 2 expeditions, now it's 1. But either way, over a 6-month period, you'll see us operating on the station between 250 and 300 experiments at any given time. And as I mentioned before, you'll see a lot of them with the crew hands-on, like with their hands in a glove box or hands on a microscope or something like that. And then you'll see we have the ones like, for example, a lot of the earth science and space science experiments that go on the outside of the station. Those are operated by folks on the ground. And Ricky also mentioned, as far as flying up experiments, sometimes I get the question of how many we fly up at a time. It depends on how you count them, because some of the things like the National Lab works with NanoRex and some other companies to fly multiple payloads inside one set of modules. There might be 8 experiments in one, but on the order of probably 30 or 40 go up on a given mission at a time. Some of those are new, and some of those are to augment or to actually resupply some of the ongoing science that's already up there on station. And I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question about the total research. Has been about a little over 3,000 experiments on the life of the station.
That's a lot of space science, and we're happy for that. Ryan, somebody, Ruth in Ethiopia, has a specific question about bio and cell chemistry and whether it differs in space, or if you do the same project on Earth. How does that differ? Can you talk a little bit about those differences?
Sure. So when you're thinking about, say, chemistry, one of the things that's going to change is you don't have buoyancy induced convection. So you're not going to have a natural mixing that you get when heat rises and kind of naturally mixes things up. You're also not going to have sedimentation though. So you, a lot of times things, you're not going to have layers that kind of build up if you're making a material. On the bio side, genes kind of change in which ones are expressed versus, on ground and up there. And when the cells are aggregating and growing together, it's a lot easier for them to make more 3D structures instead of, building out in more planar 2D up in microgravity. So you can get more tissue-like constructs up there a lot easier than I think that you can down here.
Thank you for that, Ryan. We do a lot of experiments in those kind of places. I think you outlined a few with the glass, the exotic glass and things where they're different because they are in that microgravity environment. Samantha, there's been a bunch of questions, and I know I don't want to steal all the stuff from your breakout, but there are some people who want to know about what kind of things that they have access to K-12, because their kids are interested, or they are a child who is watching us right now. And could you just give us a few things? And Ryan, they like your periodic table, so stay nerdy, man. Samantha, what kind of resources do we have for us and for NASA that people can get for, download for their kids, get their kids involved, and make little astronauts who someday follow Ricky to space?
Well, definitely. Thank you, Christine. I know you got to see the video or the slides earlier with Nickelodeon Slime in Space, and they have a virtual field trip that takes you through that experiment and all the science that was learned, so that you can do that today if you wanted to at home or in a classroom, as well as Storytime from Space that you saw Kate Rubins holding that book. And Ricky did an amazing reading of another book called Mission to Guitaria, which is a part of this Storytime from Space program. But we have dozens of education programs. Most of them are free or very low cost. So I definitely encourage you to check out the website. Programs like Tomatosphere, where we've sent tomato seeds to space. And there's just countless ones. I know Ricky had mentioned ERIS, which is a ham radio opportunity. And so we're going to dive in our STEM session and talk about a lot of those education programs, but there's so many that you can pick up and do right now today.
That's super. Thanks for that. And there are experiments all the time. I am aware of some that are going up in August on that flight with some Girl Scouts and some other kids who have experiments that go to space all the time. So if you're out there and you're a student, K-12, and you want to imagine doing an experiment, there's places and ways for you to do that. Ricky, you're just being inundated by questions, so I'm going to not hold back and ask you. One of the big questions people are asking is about getting weaker in space, because you don't have gravity, and they showed you being carried off of the capsule, for example. So tell us about that. The flight is great, but the landing is tough, and the gravity gorilla that hits you when you get back.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. The gravity gorilla. It's a great way of great term, because it's not only the heaviness. There's also your inner ear is trying to figure out what's going on. So there's a dizziness that when you first land. So getting helped out of the capsule, it varies per individual. I always am amazed when I see someone who, boy, they look like they just stepped out of a car when they're being pulled out of the Soyuz. That was not the case with me, but. The recovery is fairly quick, short term. Like by the time I landed back in Houston in 24 hours, if you would have seen me, other than the fact you thought I needed to get out in the sun a little bit because I was a little pale, you would have said, oh, I wouldn't have guessed that guy was in space. In fact, we pretty much go right to the gym and start rehabilitation. There's a 30-day rehabilitation, 30 to 45 days that comes along when you return. And they're testing you compared to what you had done pre-flight. And frankly, if all of us were able to exercise 2.5 hours a day as part of your work day, you would probably be in pretty good shape. And I think most astronauts, once they've rehabilitated a little bit, come back to Earth probably in better physical condition than prior to their flight, where they're really busy training and tending to family details and that kind of stuff. So, but I think long-term, I've heard one astronaut say it's about a day for a complete recovery. So if you're in space for 197 days, about a day, 197, all those little fine muscles that you didn't use for a long period of time, particularly along the spine. For me, that was one thing. And confidence in your balance. It takes a little while, but we've got some of that figured out, and the exercise program is really, really good.
Well, let's talk just really quick about that exercise program. Your day is pretty scheduled up there, and
Yes.
and they schedule exercise. By the way, I'm sorry, I stole Gravity Gorilla from Serena.
Oh,
So
okay.
I credit to Serena for the term Gravity Gorilla, but they schedule your exercise, and they have a name for it. It's not called exercise. It's not like you go to the gym. Could you just talk a little bit about how much of your day do you have to exercise? Because I don't like 15 minutes in the gym, so I don't know that I can be an astronaut.
Well, you have about a 12-hour workday scheduled, from the morning planning conference with the ground to the evening planning conference to the ground. You have time for a meal sandwiched in there. And then you have about 2.5 hours for exercise, one of which would be cardio, which would be on the treadmill or the bicycle. And the other would be using the advanced resistive exercise device, which is kind of microgravity weightlifting. You typically don't use all that time because you also have to get changed into your workout clothes. And then when you're done, you got to clean yourself up so you can go back to work. But 2.5 hours a day. On the weekend, I typically worked out 6 days a week. And Sundays, what I would do is I would just walk on the treadmill and watch television. Just go out for a walk. We weren't really going anywhere, but just that sense of just walking, I found was really helpful, again, for those really the fine muscles in my back and my lower back. I felt were the things that were most benefited by exercise. And then there's also the kind of the escape from the frantic day. That exercise is good for you on Earth too, right? Because it kind of clears your head and lets you focus on something else for a while.
Thanks for that. That's really interesting. And again, maybe I would not have made it as an astronaut for lack of interest in doing 2.5 hours of exercise. Hey, David Brady, are you still with me? I have a question for you about how many team members it's getting crowded up there. Are you still with me, David? Maybe. I'll move on and I'll get back to David about how crowded it is and what the plan is to do that. Ryan, some questions are about how much is this? I mean, how much does it cost to do an experiment? Because we're talking a lot of astronaut time, a lot of rocket fuel and things. How does that happen? Tell me about paying for this.
Sure. So through our cooperative agreement with NASA, what we can offer at the National Lab is the resource allocation. And what I mean by that is the upmass on the rocket, putting your payload on the rocket and sending that up to the ISS. The crew time. So folks like Ricky up there, taking out your experiment, the time that's necessary to set it up or run it, and then sending that back down if you need that returned. There's an additional cost in this that hasn't necessarily been talked about, and that's kind of the implementation partner that I talked about. These are commercial companies that their expertise is in translating your ground-based research into something that can be done on the station. In some cases, they own and operate the hardware that you would actually use up there. Now, that can vary widely depending on the experiment. Of tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, we ourselves don't describe ourselves as a funding organization. We sometimes have small amounts for grants, but a lot of times we work with partners to try to help in that regard. So in some of the cases, you'll see our solicitations, our research announcements out there. They detail what funding is available, if any, and but we always cover the flight and the astronaut time and the downpass.
Well, thank you. And if those of you who are sticking around for the breakout session with Ryan and Sean, they're going to be able to tell you more about that. Hey, I see David is back. So David, you thought you were going to escape a question from me, but I want to know, how do they fit all those astronauts up there? And what's happening now that they're going to have these private astronaut missions? What's happening with, are they just going to buckle on a new bedroom? What happens up there, David?
Well, every time we have crew members come up, for, like, say, commercial crew program, the vehicles they're using for these private astronaut missions were developed as part of our commercial crew program. And that was designed for us to maximize science, because as we talked about before, and as Ricky showed you, a lot of the science is hands-on. And for a while, we were running into the problem of we didn't have enough, we had more science than the crew members that we had available to do it. Recently, with the addition over the last year or two, with the addition of the commercial crew program, currently now at SpaceX Crew Dragon, pretty soon we'll have Boeing Starliner flying as well. Then we will have so many crew members that will have other constraints, like an amount of mass you can fly up on our cargo vehicles. Or for example, if you get 5 experiments and they all need the 2 glove boxes that we have on station, then we're going to have to sequence those. So the good news is that because of our new vehicles, we've not only been able to enable these private astronaut missions, the first of which is currently tentatively planned to fly probably sometime next year, but we've also eliminated the constraint that we used to have on crew time. And we're still dealing with the other constraints in terms of stowage and facility availability and all that. But that's one thing we've been able to improve. And because the companies, SpaceX and Boeing, own these vehicles, they're in a position to partner with NASA and sell use of these vehicles for other things, which will continue to develop this low Earth orbit economy. I think anyone who follows this probably knows these numbers, but it's interesting to me because I just recently started following this a few years ago. In the year 2006, the low Earth economy was about $170 billion. In 2016, in 10 years, it already grown to 345. I think the latest numbers are pushing 400 now, and there's a lot of conferences now talking about a $1 trillion low Earth orbit space economy eventually. So NASA is very proud to have partnered with folks that National Lab partners with a lot. We've partnered with folks like SpaceX and Boeing and other commercial companies. Commercial cargo resupply is our main way we get our science up there, and also to enable these new capabilities that these companies and humanity can benefit from in general.
That's good to know. Thank you, David. I appreciate that, because it does look, when you showed that picture, there were a lot of astronauts in that picture. And Ricky, when you showed us boarding, it looked a little bit crowded even coming through the door. There's a couple of people who really want to know what constitutes an emergency in space, Ricky. Like, what would make you nervous because it's an emergency?
It's the same thing that would make the ground team nervous. And so the emergencies, they thought of the major emergencies, and on the space station, and we train for these. We have memorized responses for these 3 events: a fire, which in a microgravity environment is just like on Earth. You don't want your house on fire. 2 is we use ammonia for our cooling systems to help take the heat generated from the space station and disperse it out into space. If that ammonia were to make its way into our ventilation, it's highly toxic. So we train for an ammonia response. And the third one is depressurization. If we start to lose atmospheric pressure, either from something hitting the space station or the space station's been up there for 20 years, some of the hardware, starting to give way in a very harsh environment, we have a memorized response. So we don't have to talk to the ground too much. They'll know what we're going to do for a first handful of steps to save ourselves and then to save the space station as best we can. And then once we are in that position, we can work with the ground to try to solve the problem. So you train for it, you're prepared for it, you practice it on the ground, you practice it on orbit, and you just hope the day doesn't come. But if it does, you have a lot of tools in your pocket to help deal with it.
That's good to know. And you do train for a long time to be an astronaut. It's not like, a couple of months and they throw you up there. It's many years. So I know that there's a long time to train, including in a very, very large pool in Houston. So, I mean, lots of training happens. And I'm sure there's some things that are published about the astronaut training. Samantha, if somebody wants to be the next Ricky, right, and you've been an educator yourself, as so has Ricky, so I'm going to ask you both this question, starting with Samantha. What does that mean I have to take in college? Like, I'm in full disclosure, Christine is an art major. Could I ever go to space, or do I really have to take a STEM science major? Samantha, tell me what I have to do.
Well, definitely. And my background is with NASA education as well. So there's definitely a place in space industry for everyone. Now, depending on what your career field is, obviously that's going to make a huge difference. I know I was excited when the teacher from space program started and I was an educator. Did not go quite as far as Ricky, so congratulations, Rick. That's amazing. But there, as you saw when we were talking about the crews coming on, where everyone from people who are in the military to doctors to geologists, you name it, there are places that are NASA and everyone are looking for to discover the new places that we're going and needing those career fields. So definitely there's lots to look into depending on what career field or what you're passionate about in the space industry. So definitely talk to us, work with us, explore with us. We can definitely help you steer you in the right direction. But Ricky's probably got a really great answer.
No, your answer was perfect. For a professional astronaut with NASA, currently you need an advanced degree in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But the good news is—
So that art major thing's just out.
The good news is the space is opening up more and more for everyone. And with the commercialization of space, there's going to be more and more opportunities for folks with different backgrounds to go to space. And I think it's absolutely critical as we tell the story of our planet and tell the story of the formation of the solar system. A science perspective is critical, but that's all those other skills that help round out the story. So I look forward to more and more people flying to low Earth orbit and beyond to help share the wonder of that experience.
Thanks for that. And for all of us who are on, and you see a number of my colleagues here, and there's some of my other colleagues, I see that Mickey, who's on my team, has been answering some questions for people in chat. She's a member of the team here. And the point is, there are many jobs for every astronaut that goes to space. There are many people who support that astronaut. David's job is over there in Houston, and he's working at the Space Center there. Ryan is an astronaut or a scientist with us. And sorry, or maybe you're going to be. He could be an astronaut. He has an advanced degree, so we could put him in the astronaut program. But my point is, there are a lot of jobs, and they don't all have to go to space. And there's going to be more people that are going to space with all of the launch vehicles that are coming up. Somebody did ask a question, David, about do other launch vehicles have to get NASA permission to launch and or dock? So you've got SpaceX and Blue Origin and others. Do they have to say, "Mother, may I, NASA, can I launch my rocket"? How does that work?
Well, for anything we fly up to the space station, Ricky mentioned a little bit about when they have emergencies. The important thing is that we protect the people first, and the second most important thing is to protect the assets, because a lot of countries have invested a lot of money in these assets. So we have to do, first of all, is make sure it's technically feasible. In other words, if do they have a docking system, or do they have a berthing system that is compatible with the space station? And so far, all we've had is the ones for the space shuttle, for the cargo resupply missions, and for the crew missions, and also the Russian vehicles, the Progress and the Soyuz vehicles. The second part of that is that they would have to go through a safety process and demonstrate that they don't create a hazard to the people on board the space station. And that is part of this whole private astronaut mission, and also other flights into space, things like that. Yes, anything that's going to involve NASA systems, NASA people, is going to have to go through a rigorous safety process. But what I will say, in my 30-year career, what's interesting is that process used to be very limited to certain customers. And in the last 30 years, our collaboration partner portfolio has just exploded. And a lot of those are ISS National Lab collaboration partners. I want to say that y'all have a list of, if I remember right, about 40 implementation partners who can help people get their hardware into space. And part of that is the same.
But who's
37?
37, but who's counting?
I was close. And then,
then
as I recall, you've got an even smaller group, but a very prestigious group that actually have commercial facilities that people can do their research in on space station. So how this all ties together is that it all has to meet the safety standards, but we are looking more and more to collaborate in unique and imaginative, innovative ways in order to make the most of this fabulous platform in low Earth orbit.
And so that brings me to a question I'm going to ask everybody. And it's hard to pick a favorite experiment because they're all cool, and they're all doing amazing things. So I'm going to ask if you could highlight one that you thought was really something that the people here in around the world who are listening today would like to hear about. So I'm going to go to Dr. Reeves first and ask if you had to pick one that you said highlights what you were surprised or thought was cool. And then I'm going to go around. So Samantha and Ricky and David, you get ready because we're going to have you answer that question too.
Great. Yeah, so I talked about the Z-Blend. I think that's really interesting. I'll go with another example for in-space production. And this highlights a collaboration that we have with the National Science Foundation. So there's a project that hasn't yet flown, but very will soon, with Stanford University, Professor Debbie Sineski and Dr. Frick. And what they're doing is they're going to fly a graphene aerogel. And so an aerogel is just a porous material that has a lot of air in it, but it's very strong for what it is. And you add graphene in, and you get a lot of very good electrical properties in there. And the idea is that in microgravity, we're not going to get packing down of that, whereas we might get that here on Earth. So I'm very excited to kind of see where that goes. And, can we get better products up there in microgravity? And could that lead to some future commercial product?
Thank you for that, Ryan. Okay, Samantha, you're up next, and I bet you see some really cool STEM stuff. So give us an example of they're all cool, I understand, but give us one.
I know it's hard not to go straight to slime in space, right? That one was really amazing. However, for me, I think the ones that are really transformative are like the cancer research that's taking place right now. And as a young girl, my mom battled with cancer, and so being able to make the connection with that was really inspiring. And I know it inspires a lot of students out there that are having family members or loved ones that are dealing with that. And we have a program called Orion's Quest that has actually taken that research and put it into curriculum for teachers and students to use and to better understand the research that's happening and how students can be a part of it. So I really gravitate to those types of to experiments and projects that are going on just because they're so meaningful and impactful for us down here on Earth.
Thanks for that, Samantha. Okay, Ricky, you've been hands-on these experiments, so I'm sure it's harder for you to pick one because I saw some of the ones that you showed in your videos, but just tell us about one that really got your attention.
Well, I was also an experiment, but that wasn't my favorite one. But one of the, I think one of my favorite things to be a part of was, with a lot of help from a team on the ground, we were the first crew to sequence RNA in low Earth orbit. And it was from bacteria that has been living and growing on the space station since those modules were launched. And So, and we know the impact of radiation on genetic material. So to see how generations of these bacteria have changed, or if they have, over the course of their stay on the International Space Station. And I think that technology was really fascinating to me because we demonstrated success, which means if we can do it on the space station, we probably do it in pretty remote locations here on Earth. And the past year has taught us the criticality of being able to do some of these things in remote locations. And then as we head out into the solar system and we're looking for signs and evidence of life, to be able to sequence anything we find to learn about it would be really profound to have that happen on the surface of another planetary body. I think that's just really exciting.
And again, I envy you, even though I was joking about being too lazy to do astronaut exercise. I envy that you got to do that, and the view was heavenly. So we're all excited about the video you showed us today. So David Brady, you don't get off easy. What is an experiment that you would like to highlight that you thought was just absolute coolness?
Well, you know, as a speaker, you always like think of the answer to the question, and you listen to your colleagues talk, and you go, "Oh crap, you know, Ricky stole the one I was going to say," or you know, Ryan. The neat thing about that, though, is that Samantha and Ricky and Ryan said things that are in my top 10 list. And that just shows you how cool it is to see how much impact multiple experiments and multiple research fields are having, you know, on our ability to do things to improve life on Earth. Just to add one quick note to what Ryan said, Debbie Sineski, if I remember right, Ryan, we met her through Destination Station San Jose when we were out there at Stanford before. At least I met her then. And I think it's always cool to see how this event is leading to real research on board station. And I know that we had, not too long ago, we had Delta Faucet fly, and that was the result of a Destination Station Indianapolis. So we love to come and talk to people and inspire people. But in the end, it's really neat to see how much tangible research, how much tangible results we get out of these events.
Yeah, and I know there's some people from the University of Pittsburgh who are out in the audience, and they've been working on some experiments with us as well. And we visited them just about 2.5 years ago for a destination station. So you're right. From these destination stations, we've had some great experiments come from those. And it's been my pleasure to just be part of the thing where, you know, we're seeing these experiments come in and all these great ideas, and that may really make some changes to life here on Earth and people's health and the benefit there. And I also think just having Ricky tell us about what it's like, look at that big, beautiful Earth behind him, and everyone's desire, I think, to keep our Earth and our planet beautiful. It's where we live. And so I think that astronauts always help us to bring attention to sustainability measures and taking good care of the planet we live on. And astronauts are great ambassadors for that reason. We're running out of time, and I know there's a bunch more questions. So don't worry, here's a couple of things. When we're done here, we're gonna take a short break, and then we've got some breakout sessions. The STEM guys are going to have the luxury of Ricky in the STEM session, so that if you didn't get to ask questions and you want to join the STEM session, ask Ricky some more questions and Samantha, you're going to go to that breakout session. And then there's a session called Science, which is about the science and access. So if you've been asking questions about how to get your neuroscience into space or whatever, you're going to join Ryan and Justin and Sean, who are going to tell you that. So I'm also supposed to say that the cameras are disabled. So if you haven't been able to turn on your picture so we can see you, my apologies. I did not realize that was disabled. But you can see our cast of characters here, so that's a good thing. If you've enjoyed this, I invite you to register for the ISS R&D session in August. So there it is, there's my page. There's a conference in August. It is virtual, so you can join it online, and it is without fee, so you don't have to pay registration fee this year. So we welcome you to join, and then you can come and listen to we will have astronaut speakers, we will have some keynote speakers from NASA. And so if you've enjoyed this, let's dive in deeper at the August sessions, and hope you will join us for that. So, and my friends from from NASA and from Ryan is also hosting a session at the ISS R&D. So please join us for that. Stay tuned because we are going to break out into some smaller breakout sessions with more opportunity to talk. What we'd like you to do is you will be, I have the information about how to get to the breakout. You will be automatically sent to the breakout that you signed up. If you're not automatically sorted, it should ask you which one you want, and you'll be able to pick science. So go to Ryan's session, or STEM, which is Ricky and Samantha. And if you still can't get into a session, just stay in this Zoom chat, and our IT guys are here and they will help to put you into the session of your choice. And we really would like you to stay with us. I thank you all. It's been fantastic having you in the audience. I love the chat going on. I love everybody sharing information. It's been my great pleasure today. And with that, I thank you, and we're going to move to a break and the breakout sessions. Thank you all.